The letter came on a Tuesday morning, folded once inside an envelope with my name typed across the front. There was no stamp. Nathan had driven to my house sometime before sunrise and slipped it through the brass mail slot rather than ring the bell. I knew that because I had been awake since 5, listening to rain tick against the kitchen windows and waiting for the coffee maker to finish. At 73, sleep had become less a night-long event than a collection of short agreements my body kept breaking. I opened the envelope beside the sink. "Dad, don't expect me to take care of you in old age. I have my own life and family. You need to make arrangements that don't involve us. Nathan." That was all. No greeting, no explanation, no mention of the question I had asked him the evening before, which was whether he could drive me to an eye appointment on Friday because the clinic planned to dilate my pupils. I had not asked him to move into my house. I had not asked him to bathe me, feed me, or surrender his future. I had asked for one ride across town after the receptionist warned me not to drive home. I read the note 3 times, not because it was difficult to understand, but because cruelty looks different when it is printed neatly on good paper. Nathan had used the stationery from Whitmore Building Supply. Our company name was embossed at the top in dark blue, above the sentence telling me I was no longer part of his responsibility. For 41 years, that name had meant something to me. I had painted it by hand on our first delivery truck. My wife, Evelyn, had answered the phone from a plywood desk while our baby slept in a laundry basket beneath it. Nathan had grown up running between stacks of lumber, wearing a red plastic hard hat and asking every contractor if he could help. When he was 10, he told his teacher he would own the company one day. I had saved that school paper in my desk. Now he was 45, our operations director, and apparently too occupied with his own life to spend 90 minutes taking his father to an ophthalmologist. I did not call him. I did not tear the letter or march into the office demanding an apology. I placed it in the clear sleeve of the household binder Evelyn had once labeled important papers, then called the clinic and arranged a medical ride service for Friday. The round trip would cost $86. The woman on the phone apologized for the price. "It's cheaper than misunderstanding where I stand," I told her. After breakfast, I drove to the office of my estate attorney, Laura Chen. The appointment had already been scheduled for 10. That was the part Nathan did not know. Evelyn and I had believed that old age should be planned before it became an emergency, so every August I met Laura and our accountant, Miles Donnelly, to review insurance, trusts, medical directives, and the condition of the business. Evelyn had died 6 years earlier, but I had kept the appointment because routine was one of the ways grief learned to behave. Laura's office occupied the second floor of a converted brick schoolhouse. She was 52, precise without being cold, and had known our family for nearly 20 years. Miles sat beside her at the conference table with a laptop open and 3 stacks of paper marked with yellow tabs. "You look tired," Laura said. "I learned something useful before breakfast." I handed her Nathan's letter. She read it once and set it flat on the table. Miles leaned over, adjusted his glasses, and read it too. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. That was one reason I trusted them. "What prompted this?" Laura finally asked. "A ride to the eye doctor." Miles looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "A ride?" "A ride." Laura slid the letter into a document envelope. "May I have my assistant scan this? I brought it because I want to revise my care plan. If Nathan doesn't intend to help, I need the documents to reflect reality. I don't want anyone calling him in an emergency and hearing that sentence for the first time." "That's sensible," she said. "We can name a professional care coordinator and change the backup agent on your health directive. Your primary agent is still Dr. Miriam Shaw?" Miriam was Evelyn's younger sister, a retired pediatrician who lived 20 minutes away. "Yes." She agreed again last month. Miles had stopped looking at the letter. He was staring at his laptop screen with a frown that made a narrow line between his eyebrows. "Paul," he said, "before we change anything, I need to ask you about Harbor Family Services." The name meant nothing to me. "What is it?" "I hoped you could tell me. The Whitmore Family Care Reserve has been paying it $3,200 a month. Some months more." I thought he must be referring to my long-term care insurance premium. Evelyn and I had created the reserve after watching her mother exhaust most of her savings during 4 years of dementia. The trust held money separate from the business, intended for home aids, accessible renovations, medical transportation, and whatever care either of us might need. After Evelyn died, I became the sole beneficiary. Nathan served as administrative co-trustee with Commonwealth Fiduciary because we believed family oversight would keep the professional fees honest. "I don't know any Harbor Family Services," I said. Miles turned the laptop toward me. A ledger filled the screen. Each month contained a payment to HF's elder support. The amounts varied from $2,800 to $4,400. Beside them were descriptions: meal preparation, medication supervision, transportation, personal safety monitoring, overnight respite. "I prepare my own meals," I said. Miles nodded slowly. "I fill my prescriptions at Bellman's and pick them up myself. Miriam drove me to one cardiology appointment last winter because there was ice. No one has ever stayed overnight here to monitor me." Laura's voice became very quiet. "How long have these payments been made?" Miles clicked to another sheet. 42 months. Total disbursements, including mileage and home safety reimbursements, are $168,400. I felt something change inside my chest. It was not pain. I knew pain. This was the body making room for a fact the mind had not accepted. "Who approved them?" Miles looked toward Laura before answering. "Nathan submitted the invoices under his trustee authority. Commonwealth processed them because the amounts fell below the review threshold and the invoices carried your electronic acknowledgement." "My what?" He opened a scanned invoice. At the bottom was a blue check mark beside the words "Beneficiary Confirmation." Under it appeared my name, an email address I did not recognize, and a date. The service provider's address was a post office box in Fairmont. Laura searched the state corporate registry while Miles continued through the payments. Harbor Family Services LLC had been formed 43 months earlier. Its registered organizer was Melissa Whitmore, my daughter-in-law. For a few seconds, I could hear only the hum of the building's old ventilation system. Melissa had a marketing degree and managed social media for several local businesses. She had never worked as a caregiver. She visited my house at Christmas, sometimes Easter, and on the Sunday nearest my birthday, if Nathan remembered. In the previous year, she had entered my kitchen exactly 4 times. "Maybe there's an explanation," I said, and hated how quickly the words came. Parents can become defense attorneys before they understand the charge. Laura did not argue with me. "There may be, but we need records before we ask for one. If Nathan controls the email receiving those confirmations, alerting him now could cause documents to disappear." "This is theft," Miles said, then softened his tone. "At minimum, it's a serious breach of trust." I looked again at Nathan's letter. "Don't expect me to take care of you in old age." "He has been charging the trust for taking care of me," I said. "Yes," Laura replied. "And this morning he put in writing that he won't." Laura pulled the document envelope closer. "Yes." The contradiction was so clean it almost felt merciful. We spent the next 2 hours building a wall around what remained. Laura notified Commonwealth Fiduciary of a suspected breach and asked it to suspend all discretionary payments pending review. Because the professional trustee held independent authority, Nathan could not override the suspension. Miles downloaded the complete ledger, invoices, login history, and copies of every beneficiary acknowledgement. Laura prepared documents removing Nathan as backup financial agent and replacing him with Miriam and Commonwealth jointly. I signed a narrow revocation of his access to my personal accounts, not because I had proof he had used them, but because a locked door is easier to explain than an empty room. At noon, Laura asked whether I wanted to go home. "Not yet. I want to understand why. $168,000 is a lot of money, but Nathan earns a good salary. Why risk the company and his future for $3,200 a month?" Miles and Laura exchanged another glance. "There is something else," Miles said. He opened the thickest stack on the table. The cover page bore the heading, "Whitmore Continuity Option, Annual Eligibility Review." I knew the document. Evelyn and I had created the continuity option 9 years earlier, after a regional chain offered to buy Whitmore Building Supply. We did not want Nathan to inherit a tax bill that forced him to sell, but we also did not want to hand him control simply because he was our son. The option allowed a family operator to purchase my controlling units at a discounted internal valuation if that person met 3 conditions: 10 years of competent management, no undisclosed conflict of interest, and at least 24 months of substantial support that allowed the surviving founder to remain safely independent. The third condition had been Evelyn's idea. She did not mean that Nathan had to become a nurse. She meant that inheritance and responsibility should recognize each other. Rides, meals, home maintenance, coordination, regular presence. The ordinary work families do so an older parent can remain himself. At the time, the formula had valued my controlling interest at $1,400,000, payable over 12 years. The actual market value of the operating company and its 14-acre warehouse property had risen sharply since then. A preliminary offer from Harkness Development, which I had rejected the previous spring, valued the site at $9,600,000. Nathan filed notice in June that he intended to exercise the option this fall, Miles said. His eligibility package credits Harbor Family Services with providing 39 months of support. I turned pages. There were monthly care summaries, safety checklists, meal schedules, medication logs, home inspection reports. Each one described an older man who could barely function without Nathan and Melissa. According to the file, Melissa prepared 5 dinners a week. Nathan inspected my home every Saturday. They managed my appointments, organized my pills, paid my utilities, bought my groceries, and responded to 3 falls I had never suffered. The final page certified that their unpaid contribution had saved the trust more than $200,000, even though their company had billed the trust $168,400. They got paid and counted the work as unpaid? I asked. That appears to be the claim, Laura said. Miles showed me the numbers. If Nathan qualified, he could purchase control for the old formula price of $1.4 million. If he then sold to Harkness at the known offer, he and any partners could capture several $1 million in value that belonged to the company and its shareholders. Has Harkness contacted him? I don't know, Miles said. But Nathan asked me twice for updated environmental reports and a current tenant schedule. He said it was for insurance. Whitmore Building Supply did more than sell lumber and roofing. We owned a warehouse, a millwork shop, and 6 small commercial units along the river. 83 people depended on the company for wages. Some had worked with me since Nathan was in school. The Harkness proposal would demolish most of the site and replace it with apartments and retail. They offered good money because the town was building a new pedestrian bridge nearby. I had declined because no one could tell me what would happen to the workers beyond a promise to consider placements. We need to know whether there is a pending deal, I said. Laura nodded. We also need to know who created these records, who controlled the email account, and whether anyone at the company assisted. I left her office at 2:30 with a temporary care coordinator's number, a new ride schedule, and the kind of exhaustion that makes familiar streets look staged. Rain had stopped. I drove past Whitmore Building Supply but did not turn in. Nathan's black SUV was parked in my space beneath the awning. I went home and made tomato soup. At 4:15, my granddaughter Emma called. She was 21 and finishing her final year at the State University, studying occupational therapy. She had Evelyn's habit of asking a question and waiting long enough for a true answer. Grandpa, are you all right? Why wouldn't I be? Dad said you had some kind of episode and that we shouldn't upset you. I set down my spoon. What kind of episode? He didn't say. Mom said you got confused about an appointment and accused them of not helping you. They said you're going to tour a residence next week. I'm not going to tour a residence. I asked your father for a ride to an eye appointment. Emma was silent. Did he show you a letter? I asked. No. He delivered one this morning. It said I should not expect him to care for me because he has his own life and family. He wrote that? He did. Her breath caught, and I immediately regretted the bluntness. Emma was not responsible for her father's decisions. You don't need to choose sides, I said. I am handling my arrangements. I only want you to know I am safe and not confused. I know you're not confused. You haven't seen me much this semester. You are allowed to ask. Grandpa, Dad told us you didn't want visitors because you were embarrassed about forgetting things. Another neat piece slid into place. For months, Nathan had explained away missed dinners, changed plans, and the growing distance between me and the grandchildren as concern for my dignity. I had assumed Emma was busy. She had assumed I was ashamed. Isolation did not always require a locked door. Sometimes it required 2 people being told the same considerate lie. I'm having dinner with Miriam on Thursday, I said. Would you like to join us by video? Yes, please. Then we'll do that. And Emma, do not search your parents' things or confront them for me. This belongs with adults and records. You take care of your classes. I understand. After we hung up, I wrote down exactly what she had said and emailed it to Laura. Nathan arrived at 6 without knocking. His key no longer worked because I had called a locksmith on my way home. He tried it twice, then rang the bell in 3 sharp bursts. I opened the door but left the chain fastened. Why did you change the lock? He demanded. Why did you use your company key to deliver a letter before dawn instead of speaking to me? His face tightened. Nathan resembled me at that age. Broad shoulders, dark hair retreating at the temples, a small pale line above one eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. I had carried him 3 blocks after that fall because the ambulance could not find the construction road where we were riding. For years he had told the story as proof that his father always came when he called. Melissa said writing it down would prevent another argument, he said. We didn't have an argument. You keep acting like we should drop everything whenever you need something. I have a company to run. Emma's tuition, Owen's school, the mortgage. My life doesn't stop because you forgot to arrange a ride, I asked once. It isn't just the ride, it's the pattern. Name 3 other times this year. He opened his mouth, then looked past me into the hall. Let me in. We shouldn't do this on the porch. No. That answer surprised both of us. Nathan lowered his voice. Dad, you're being dramatic. I came because Commonwealth sent a notice freezing the care account. Did you call them? He had learned about the suspension in less than 4 hours. Not how I felt. Not whether I had a ride. The account. Why does freezing my care money concern you? Because I'm a trustee. I'm legally responsible. Then you can explain Harbor Family Services to the other trustee. The color in his face changed. It was slight, but I had negotiated with contractors for 4 decades. I knew the moment a man realized the other side had seen the hidden number. That's an administrative arrangement, he said. Melissa coordinates things you don't notice. 5 dinners a week? Not literally, 5 cooked dinners. Meal planning, deliveries, checking nutrition. Overnight respite? Those forms use standardized categories. 3 falls? Near falls. You told me you slipped. I told you the dog next door slipped through the fence. His jaw worked. This is exactly why we are worried. You mix up details, then accuse people who are trying to help. I felt the old reflex again, the desire to explain carefully enough that my son would return to being the person I believed he was. But a lie is not confusion simply because it is spoken about an old man. You wrote this morning that you do not and will not take care of me, I said. This afternoon you claimed 3 years of payments for doing exactly that. Laura will communicate with you about the discrepancy. You brought a lawyer into this? Your letter brought clarity into it. The lawyer was already there. He stepped closer to the door. You need to think about what you're doing to the family. I am. That's why the chain is still on. Nathan stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, Melissa warned me you would turn vindictive, and walked back to his SUV. I watched him leave, locked the door, and sat on the bottom stair until my breathing slowed. The next morning, Laura's investigator, a former bank examiner named Sofia Alvarez, met me at the house. She was in her early 60s and carried no visible drama with her, only a compact laptop and a canvas bag filled with labeled folders. My job is to build a record that does not depend on anyone's memory, she said, including yours. That protects you. We began with ordinary proof. Smart lock logs showed every code used at my doors for the previous 2 years. Nathan's code had opened the house 11 times. Melissa's had opened it 4. Miriam's had opened it 27, mostly for Sunday dinners and 2 weeks after my knee procedure. My own code showed regular daily movement. The home alarm had never recorded an overnight guest except during a Christmas storm when Miriam stayed in the guest room. Grocery receipts showed I shopped every Thursday. Pharmacy records showed I collected my medicine and had never missed a refill. My cardiologist documented normal cognition at each annual visit. My auto service records and mileage history contradicted invoices claiming Nathan drove me more than 9,000 miles. Sophia did not smile when evidence favored us. She simply labeled it. The strongest cases are often made from boring things, she said. People can argue about feelings. They have a harder time arguing with door logs. At noon, she asked for permission to inspect the email address used on the beneficiary acknowledgments. It was Paul Whitmore. Care at a mail provider I had never used. Recovery information pointed to a phone number ending in 4418. Melissa's business card showed the same digits. The login history attached to the trust portal was even worse. Almost every confirmation had been submitted from the internet address at Nathan and Melissa's house or from the Whitmore Building Supply Office. 2 were completed while I was hospitalized overnight for my knee replacement. One claimed I had personally confirmed 4 hours of yard safety assistance on a day when Nathan and Melissa had posted photographs from a resort in Mexico. By late afternoon, the question was no longer whether the records were false. The question was how many people knew. I called an emergency meeting of the company's independent directors for Friday afternoon. Whitmore had 5 board members: Nathan, me, Miles, retired contractor Denise Parker, and community bank president Calvin Brooks. Nathan assumed my meeting concerned succession. I did not correct him. Before then, I needed the eye appointment. On Friday morning, a silver medical transport van arrived at 8. The driver, a cheerful man named Leon, helped me in even though I did not need assistance. At the clinic, I learned I had early cataracts, and would probably need a simple procedure within a year. Nothing about the visit suggested I was collapsing into helplessness. Still, when the drops blurred my vision and Leon guided me from the curb to my door, I felt the edge of the future Nathan had used against me. Independence was not a permanent condition. One day I might need more than a ride. One day my hands might shake or my memory might fail. His theft did not erase that truth. That afternoon, before the board meeting, I signed a contract with an independent geriatric care manager named Rebecca Sloan. She would review my home, coordinate future transportation, maintain a medication list, and establish emergency contacts. I also placed a refundable deposit at an accessible retirement community. Not because Nathan had ordered me away, but because I wanted options chosen while my mind and body belonged entirely to me. At 2, I entered the Whitmore conference room through the same door I had opened on the company's first day in that building. Nathan sat at the far end with a leather presentation folder and a bottle of sparkling water. He wore the Navy suit Evelyn had bought him for his 40th birthday. "I'm glad you called this," he said. "We need to settle the transition before rumors hurt morale." "What rumors?" Denise asked. Nathan gave me a concerned look. "Dad has been struggling. I hoped we could keep it private, but there have been incidents. Missed appointments, confusion about expenses, accusations. Melissa and I have been supporting him for years. Yesterday he froze his own care account without understanding the consequences." Calvin folded his hands. "What transition are you proposing?" Nathan opened his folder. "I filed eligibility under the continuity option. Once the board certifies the conditions, I will purchase Dad's controlling units according to the agreed formula. He can retire with security, and the company can move forward without disruption." He passed copies around the table. The packet was polished. Charts showed improved margins under his management. Letters praised his leadership. A section titled Founder Support summarized 39 months of care coordinated by Nathan and Melissa, allowing me to remain at home despite progressive limitations. Nathan had brought me to my own board to declare me diminished and himself devoted. I let everyone finish reading. Then I placed his one-paragraph letter in front of Denise. "This arrived Tuesday morning," I said. She read it, her lips pressed together. Calvin read next. Miles already knew every word. Nathan leaned back. "That is being taken out of context." "Please provide the context," Denise said. "Dad was making unreasonable demands. I needed to establish boundaries. That doesn't erase all the support we've provided." "The immediate demand was a ride to an eye appointment," I said. He declined. "I hired a driver." Nathan's voice sharpened. "This is a family disagreement, not board business. The letter would be family business if you had not submitted 39 months of alleged caregiving as a condition of acquiring company control. You made it board business." Laura entered with Sophia and a representative from Commonwealth Fiduciary. Nathan stood. "You invited outside counsel without notifying me?" "Laura represents me and the trust, not the company. Commonwealth is the independent trustee whose money funded the care you claimed." For the next 40 minutes, Sophia presented facts. Payments totaling $168,400. An LLC owned by Melissa. False beneficiary acknowledgments linked to Melissa's phone and home internet. Door records disproving visits. Mileage logs exceeding actual travel. Medical records contradicting the care summaries. Photographs, receipts, and dates. Nathan interrupted twice. The first time he blamed standardized invoicing. The second time he said Melissa had managed the details and he had signed in good faith. Then Sophia displayed his trustee approvals, each certifying that he had reviewed the service and found it accurate. Denise removed her glasses. "Did you receive any money from Harbor Family Services?" "Our household finances are combined," Nathan said. "That wasn't the question." He looked toward me. "Dad, tell them this isn't what you want. If this gets outside this room, it will destroy Emma and Owen." It was the first time he had mentioned the children since the meeting began. "You used their future as a shield after using my future as an invoice," I said. "I won't involve them, but I won't hide records for you." Calvin asked whether any sale or financing arrangement depended on the continuity option. Nathan said no. Sophia placed one final document on the screen, an email from Nathan's company account to Harkness Development, sent 6 weeks earlier. Subject: Control Certification Timeline. The message promised that Nathan expected to hold controlling interest by October 15th and would be ready to execute a land sale at $9,600,000 before year-end. Attached was a draft exclusivity agreement and a proposed transition consulting fee of $750,000 payable to a second LLC owned by Nathan and Melissa. The room became completely still. "That email was found during the preservation of company records," Laura said. We have reason to believe other relevant messages may exist. All devices and accounts are now subject to a litigation hold. Nathan did not deny writing it. He looked at me as if I had personally placed the words in his sent folder. You rejected Harkness, he said. You rejected every opportunity because you are sentimental about an old warehouse. The land is worth more than the business. Everyone knows it. The workers are not sentimental entries on a demolition plan. They would get severance. We would all be free. You mean you would get control for $1.4 million, sell for $9.6, and collect another $750,000 through your private company? I built value too. I gave this place 20 years. And if you had proposed a fair transaction openly, those 20 years would have mattered. Instead, you invented care you did not give, billed for it, and used it to qualify for a discount designed to reward responsibility. Nathan struck the table with the flat of his hand. You made that option impossible. You keep changing the standard. Nothing is ever enough for you. I thought of the letter in my kitchen, the $86 ride, the thousands of fictional meals. One honest conversation would have been enough, I said. The board voted 4-1 to suspend Nathan as operations director pending an independent investigation. His access to company systems and property ended immediately. Commonwealth removed his transaction authority under the trust and issued a formal demand for records. The continuity claim was tabled, not yet denied, because Laura wanted every procedural step clean. Nathan gathered nothing from the table. Security escorted him to his office while a technician preserved his computer. As he reached the door, he turned to me. His anger had fallen away, leaving something younger and more frightening. What am I supposed to tell my family? Tell them the truth before someone else has to. He left without answering. The news did not stay inside the conference room. By Monday, every employee knew Nathan had been suspended. They did not know why, and I refused to let uncertainty turn the workplace into a courtroom built from gossip. I stood in the loading bay before the morning shift, between pallets of insulation and bundled oak trim, and told 83 people what I could. The board is investigating financial and governance matters involving a senior officer, I said. No conclusion will be announced until the records are reviewed. Payroll, benefits, and current jobs are secure. There is no approved sale of this property. If that changes, you will hear it from the board, not from a rumor. A forklift operator named Reggie Holt raised his hand. He had worked for us for 31 years and never raised his hand for anything. Is Nathan coming back? I don't know, I said. That answer has to be earned by the facts. The honesty did not calm everyone, but it gave them something solid to stand on. Afterward, my assistant Leslie Garner followed me to my office and closed the door. She was 60, with short gray curls and a memory more reliable than any filing system we had purchased. I think I helped him, she said. She told me Nathan had asked her to gather old insurance reports, environmental assessments, and copies of my signature from prior board consents. He claimed the bank needed them for a routine line of credit review. 2 months later, he asked her to witness an internal certificate stating that he had provided ongoing support to me. She refused because she had no personal knowledge of my home life. He said it was only confirming what everyone knew, Leslie said. When I still refused, he told me I was blocking succession and that you wanted it done quietly. Did you sign anything? No, but I gave him the old records. The signature page from the 2020 insurance package was in them. She reached into her notebook and removed a printed email. Nathan had written, "Please send the cleanest version of Dad's signature block. The scan in the property file is too grainy for the updated package." I should have asked you, she said. He was your operations director and my son. The request sounded ordinary because he designed it to sound ordinary. You brought the email now. That's what matters. Her eyes filled. Your wife would have seen through him. Maybe. Or maybe she would have wanted to believe him too. Evelyn had loved Nathan without illusion, but love still creates blind spots. She once said that our greatest mistake was giving him responsibility in pieces so small we never paused to see how much power they formed together. A company key. A trustee role, access to old signatures, the expectation that he would inherit. None had seemed dangerous alone. On Tuesday, Harkness Development's attorney contacted Laura. The company insisted it had believed Nathan's control claim was legitimate and denied knowledge of false caregiving records. Its representatives had seen a draft certificate but no final board approval. They agreed to suspend all discussions and preserve communications. The draft exclusivity agreement showed how close Nathan had come. Harkness would place a $300,000 deposit within 5 business days of his acquiring control. Nathan's consulting company would receive half of its $750,000 fee at closing. He had already promised Melissa's brother a demolition subcontract, and her father a retail leasing role. That explained the urgency, but not the beginning. Sophia traced Harbor Family Services back through 42 months of bank statements. The first payments had covered ordinary expenses: Emma's tuition shortfall, repairs to Nathan's roof, a private school deposit for Owen. Then the amounts grew. A new kitchen, a leased German SUV, credit card bills. A family cruise described online as finally enjoying the life we worked for. Nathan and Melissa earned more than enough to live comfortably. They had spent as though future ownership had already arrived. When the Harkness opportunity appeared, the false care history became more valuable than the monthly cash. It was no longer merely a way to take from the reserve. It was the bridge to control. Commonwealth sent a demand that Harbor return the full $168,400 within 30 days, subject to adjustment after the audit. Laura also notified the carrier that insured Nathan's trustee conduct. She warned me that recovery might take months or years. There may be criminal exposure, she said. The trust company is required to refer suspected exploitation of an older adult. You do not control that process. Will they arrest him? I can't predict that. Investigators will look at intent, amount, forged confirmations, and whether he tried to obtain additional property. The letter matters because it sharply contradicts the services. The idea of my son being questioned by police made my stomach turn. The idea of concealing the evidence turned it again. I won't ask anyone to ignore the law, I said. That is the right answer, even if it doesn't feel like one. On Wednesday evening, Melissa came to the house alone. She wore a cream coat and stood beneath the porch light with rain shining on her hair. I opened the door but did not invite her in. Paul, may we talk? Laura has asked that communication about the trust go through counsel. I'm not here about legal details. I'm here about your grandchildren. The phrase landed exactly where she intended. Are they safe? I asked. They're terrified. Owen heard Nathan lost his job. Emma won't answer my calls. People at school are going to find out. You can stop this before it destroys them. What do you want me to stop? The investigation. The public humiliation. We can repay the care money. Nathan will resign. You can keep the company. Repay it from what? She glanced toward the dark street. We can sell our house. Your mortgage statement shows less than $80,000 in equity. Her eyes snapped back to me. You accessed our finances? Harbor's bank records include transfers to your mortgage company. The investigators followed my money. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Melissa wrapped both hands around the strap of her handbag. Evelyn intended the care reserve for family. Nathan said reimbursement was allowed if we coordinated your needs. We did coordinate. We checked on you. We ordered groceries. We made appointments. Which appointments? I don't have dates in my head. Which groceries? Paul, this interrogation is cruel. Your invoices have dates. They say you cooked 5 dinners a week. Name one meal you cooked in my kitchen last month. The categories were for accounting. Your company claimed overnight respite while you were in Mexico. She looked away. Did Nathan write the letter, or did you? I asked. He signed it. That wasn't my question. Her face answered before her mouth did. I helped him phrase it. He needed boundaries. You call at the worst times. I called at 6:30 in the evening. We were discussing the Harkness schedule. There it was. Not confession exactly, but the truth walking past without its coat. So you were too busy planning to sell my company to drive me to the doctor, and you thought a letter would protect your evening? It was going to become Nathan's company. The option was legally created for him. You cannot pretend he is some stranger trying to steal it. The option was created for a responsible family operator. It was not created for a son who manufactured responsibility and billed me for it. Her voice hardened. Nathan gave you his entire adult life. He could have worked anywhere. He stayed in this town, inside your shadow, waiting for you to decide he was good enough. He earned a salary of $210,000 last year, a bonus, a vehicle, and equity units worth almost $900,000. Staying was not charity. You always turn love into numbers. No, Melissa, you sent the numbers. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped closer. If Nathan goes to prison, Owen will never forgive you. The threat was soft enough to pretend it was concern. I am not prosecuting Nathan, I said. I am preserving the truth. What the authorities do with it will be their decision. What Owen believes one day will be his. You will not purchase my silence with a child's future feelings. She began to cry, but even then she did not apologize. She asked me to remember all the good years. She asked what Evelyn would want. She reminded me that family problems should remain inside a family. They stopped being family problems when you created a company and sent invoices, I said. I closed the door gently. That night I slept badly. At 3 in the morning, I walked into the room that had once been Nathan's. His high school baseball trophy still stood on the bookcase. So did a photograph from his college graduation, Evelyn on one side and me on the other, both of us looking at him instead of the camera. Parents are told to let children become themselves. No one explains what to do when the self they become knows exactly where your trust is stored. I took the photograph downstairs but did not put it away. I set it on my desk beside the care invoices. Both were true. Nathan had once been a boy who slept against my shoulder during thunderstorms. He was also a man who used my name to steal. Refusing one truth would not repair the other. Emma came home from the university that Friday. She asked to meet at Miriam's house rather than mine because reporters had begun leaving messages after a brief item appeared in the local business journal. Whitmore Building Supply suspends executive amid governance review. She looked exhausted. Mom says you want Dad arrested. Dad says the board ambushed him because you can't accept retiring. Owen thinks the company is bankrupt. The company is not bankrupt. I did not ask for anyone's arrest. Your father presented a control claim at a properly called board meeting. The records were reviewed in response. Did he steal from you? I looked at Miriam. She gave a small nod. Records show that a company owned by your mother received $168,400 from a trust for services I did not receive. Your father approved those payments. They submitted acknowledgments in my name. They also used the supposed care to qualify for a discounted purchase of the company. An independent investigation is underway. Emma's hands trembled. They said Harbor was consulting work. Did you know the name? Mom used it when she paid some of my tuition last year. She told me she had picked up a new client. That money was not your fault. You accepted help from your parents. It came from you. It came from a trust intended for my care. Your parents chose the source, not you. She covered her face. Miriam moved beside her and placed an arm around her shoulders. I should pay it back, Emma said. No. You should finish your degree. If the audit identifies money used for tuition, repayment will be handled with your parents. I will not transfer their misconduct onto you. How can you say that and still do this to Dad? The question hurt because it was honest. I am not doing the invoices to him, I said. I am not doing the false records to him. I am refusing to pretend they don't exist. If I hide them to spare him consequences, I teach him that being my son means the rules stop at our door. Emma lowered her hands. Do you still love him? Yes. That is part of why this is so difficult. He says you never loved him as much as the company. I had expected anger, blame, even disbelief. I had not expected that old accusation to enter through my granddaughter. When Nathan was 16, he wanted to attend a baseball camp in Arizona, I said. The company was nearly out of cash because 2 contractors had failed to pay us. I sold my fishing boat to send him. When he failed his first year of college, I drove 6 hours, slept in a motel, and helped him withdraw before the grades became permanent. When he and your mother wanted their house, Evelyn and I loaned them the down payment. I missed things too. I worked long days. I was not a perfect father. But your father's statement is a feeling, not a financial record. We can talk about that feeling after he stops using it to excuse what he did. Emma stared at the floor. He told me not to see you. You are 21. I won't tell you whether to see him. I also won't ask you to report on him. You are his daughter and my granddaughter, not evidence traveling between us. She began crying then, the quiet kind that comes from being given permission not to choose. I sat beside her, and for several minutes none of us tried to solve anything. The independent audit took 6 weeks. During that time, the company operated under Denise and our controller, Mark Ellison. I resumed daily office hours but kept my promise to myself not to pretend I was 40. Rebecca, the care manager, completed a home safety assessment. We installed brighter stair lighting, a second railing, and lever handles on 2 doors. She arranged a driver network and organized my medical information in a secure account shared with Miriam. The changes cost less than 1 month of Harbor's fictional services. I also underwent a voluntary capacity evaluation by a neuropsychologist selected by Laura. It took nearly 4 hours. I repeated lists of words, drew clocks, solved patterns, answered questions about finances, and explained the consequences of my decisions. The doctor found normal age-related slowing and no cognitive impairment. I resented having to prove what younger people were allowed to assume, but the report gave the truth a professional spine. Nathan could no longer turn disagreement into diagnosis without confronting independent evidence. 2 days after the evaluation, he filed a petition asking the probate court to appoint a temporary conservator over my business and trust interests. His filing said I was paranoid, emotionally unstable after Evelyn's death, and vulnerable to manipulation by Laura and Miles. It cited my sudden lock change, suspension of a devoted son, hiring of strangers for care, and refusal to accept a lucrative development offer. Attached were 3 of Harbor's fabricated care summaries and affidavits from Melissa and her father. The petition did not mention his letter. It did not mention the payments. It did not mention his consulting fee. Laura called me at 7 that morning. The judge denied emergency control without a hearing, but Nathan is requesting an expedited evaluation. We already have one. Exactly. His filing also opens discovery. He may not appreciate what that means. He knows what it means. He's hoping I will be too ashamed to answer publicly. For most of my life, that hope might have been reasonable. I had kept Nathan's college failure private, covered an early business loss caused by his mistake, and told relatives his marriage was under pressure when Melissa temporarily moved out after discovering his gambling on sports apps. Each time I believed privacy allowed recovery. Perhaps it did, but privacy without accountability had also taught him that his father would absorb the cost of his image. Answer everything, I told Laura. No gossip, no unnecessary humiliation, but no sealed version of the truth just because he is my son. At the hearing 3 weeks later, Nathan sat across the aisle with Melissa and their attorney. He did not look at me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, paneled in pale wood, with a clock that ticked loudly whenever attorneys stopped speaking. Nathan's lawyer described a loving son forced into action by a father's decline. He pointed to the care records, the home modifications I had recently made, the hired driver, and my deposit at a retirement community. Mr. Whitmore's abrupt dependence on paid strangers, he said, demonstrates precisely the vulnerability his son fears. Laura stood. Planning is not incapacity. If hiring a driver and installing a railing proved incompetence, every prudent older adult would lose the right to make decisions the moment he prepared for aging. She submitted the neuropsychologist's report, testimony from my physician, business records, and my own detailed care plan. Then she introduced Nathan's letter. The judge read it in silence. Mr. Whitmore, she said to Nathan, you ask this court to believe you provided years of substantial daily care and should now control your father's affairs because he depends on you. Yet days before filing, you wrote that he should not expect care from you and must make arrangements that do not involve your family. Explain the discrepancy. Nathan said the letter established healthy boundaries. He said Melissa had performed most services. He said my refusal to appreciate invisible labor had pushed them to frustration. Laura then showed the smart lock records and Harbor's invoices. On 78 days, when Melissa billed in-home meal preparation, her phone had logged into Harbor's system from her own house. On 15, she was out of state. On 4, she was out of the country. Nathan's attorney objected to the details, but the judge allowed them as relevant to the credibility of his claimed care. When Melissa testified, she said she used remote coordination and that invoice categories had been misunderstood. Laura handed her a form claiming she had personally assisted me after a bathroom fall on March 11th of the previous year. Where did the fall occur? Laura asked. In his upstairs bathroom. What injury did he suffer? Bruising on his left hip. How did you enter the home? With our family key. Laura displayed the alarm and lock logs. No one entered my house that day except me. She then displayed Melissa's photographs from a ski lodge 300 miles away, posted the same morning. Melissa's face went white. The judge denied the petition from the bench. She found no evidence I lacked capacity and substantial reason to question the accuracy of Nathan's supporting records. She ordered him to pay my reasonable legal fees and referred the disputed care documents to the county's Elder Protection Unit, which had already received Commonwealth's report. Outside the courtroom, Nathan finally approached me. Are you satisfied? He asked. No. You won. Everyone heard Laura call Melissa a liar. What else do you want? I want to understand when asking for help became permission to take from me. You never asked the right way. You expected. I asked for a ride. You filed for control of my life. His face twisted. Because you were destroying everything. Harkness was our one chance. You would rather die at that desk and leave us a complicated company than let me turn it into security. Security for whom? For my family. I thought I was included in that word. He looked away. You are my father, he said. That isn't the same thing. The sentence was quieter than the one in his letter, and worse. No, I said. It seems it isn't. I walked to Laura's car without looking back. The audit report arrived the following Monday. It was 114 pages long. Harbor's false billings were only the most personal part. Nathan had also directed company purchases to a logistics firm owned by Melissa's brother at rates 12% above market. He had used employees to prepare Harkness materials without board authorization. He had shared confidential environmental and tenant records. He had concealed the proposed consulting fee and promised contracts to relatives. The estimated harm, excluding the attempted land transfer, exceeded $430,000. The report also made one point that mattered deeply to me. Nathan's ordinary management performance had been strong. Sales had grown. Inventory loss had fallen. He had modernized deliveries and secured valuable supplier agreements. He did not need to invent his worth. He had already earned respect and meaningful equity. He had risked it because respect was not the same as control, and meaningful was not the same as immediate. At the final board meeting, Nathan attended by video with his attorney. The board unanimously denied his continuity claim. His fabricated support failed the eligibility condition, and his undisclosed Harkness fee violated the conflict of interest clause. We terminated his employment for cause and initiated recovery of company losses. His existing minority equity did not vanish. Taking it without due process would have made our response another abuse of power. Under the shareholder agreement, the company could offset proven damages and legal costs against future distributions, but Nathan remained entitled to whatever value survived that accounting. I insisted on that distinction. Why protect him? Denise asked after the vote. I'm not protecting him from consequences, I said. I'm protecting the company from becoming the kind of place where rules change depending on whom we are angry with. The board authorized negotiations with prosecutors and insurers. Nathan and Melissa would have the opportunity to make restitution, surrender the false proceeds, and cooperate regarding the forged confirmations. Criminal decisions belonged to the state. Before we adjourned, I presented a second proposal. The continuity option had failed because it placed too much judgment inside family relationships. I recommended replacing it with an employee ownership transition. Over 5 years, a trust would acquire 51% of Whitmore Building Supply for the benefit of eligible workers. I would retain a minority interest and chair the board for no more than 2 years. The riverfront parcel could be divided. The active warehouse and mill would remain with the company, while 4 unused acres near the new bridge could be sold through an open process. Proceeds would fund modernization, my independent care reserve, and the employee trust's purchase. Nathan had been partly right. I had let sentiment delay necessary decisions. The answer was not to hand him everything or preserve every brick. The answer was to plan without stealing from the people who had built value beside us. Miles ran the numbers. Denise asked hard questions. Calvin requested an outside valuation and fairness opinion. No one applauded. Good governance rarely looks like a movie ending. It looks like people asking who pays taxes and what happens if interest rates rise. The board approved the study unanimously. For the first time since the letter arrived, I felt the company moving toward a future that did not depend on my son's goodness or my fear of his absence. That relief did not make the evenings easier. Nathan had been part of the rhythm of my life, even when he was not physically present. I still noticed a truck model he liked and thought of sending him a photograph. I still reached for my phone when the baseball scores came in. On Sundays, I found myself cooking too much because some part of me remembered the years when he and the children came after church. The instinct to contact him usually lasted 3 or 4 seconds. Then I remembered that communication was being reviewed by attorneys and that his last voluntary use of my front door had been to deliver a rejection on company stationery. Miriam called those moments grief with a living address. People think grief needs a death certificate, she said. It doesn't. It needs the loss of what you believed would continue. She and I began eating dinner together twice a week. Sometimes Rebecca joined us to discuss practical matters, but most evenings we avoided the investigation. Miriam told stories about her volunteer clinic. I complained about television news. We walked around the block when the weather allowed. None of it resembled the heroic care Nathan's invoices described. It was simply company, offered without a form. In November, the elder protection investigator asked me to give a recorded statement. Detective Roland Pierce met Laura and me in a Plain County office. He was younger than Nathan, with a wedding ring worn dull at the edges and a patient way of returning to dates. He asked what services I had received, what I understood about the trust, and whether I had ever authorized Melissa to create a confirmation account. He showed me 20 invoices, selected from different years. I denied each false event separately. Then he placed Nathan's letter on the table. "How did you feel when you read this?" he asked. Laura shifted beside me. Feelings were not usually the center of financial interviews. "Small," I said, "then clear." Did it cause you to investigate the account? I already had an annual review scheduled. It caused me to change my care plan. The review exposed the payments. If your son had agreed to drive you, would you have found them? I considered the question. Miles would have shown me the ledger eventually, but perhaps Nathan would have attended the meeting and explained Harbor before I saw it. Perhaps I would have accepted some vague account of coordination. Perhaps one more ordinary favor would have protected an extraordinary lie. I don't know, I said. His refusal removed the explanation he had been selling. Pierce nodded. The written contradiction is important, the phrase traveled through the case. A written contradiction. Not a curse, not revenge, not a father's dramatic final act. A fact placed beside another fact. Nathan and Melissa were interviewed separately. I learned only what their attorneys later disclosed during settlement discussions. Nathan initially claimed Melissa handled Harbor and that he believed the services were legitimate. Melissa produced messages showing Nathan had designed the invoice categories and instructed her to keep each payment below Commonwealth's enhanced review threshold. She claimed he told her the money was an advance against his inheritance. Then, investigators showed Nathan messages in which Melissa warned him that the false confirmations could be traced to her phone. His reply read, "Dad never checks digital details. By the time anyone cares, I'll control the company." They had protected themselves from each other before either had tried to protect me. The county prosecutor charged both with exploitation of an older adult, conspiracy, identity fraud, and falsifying business records. Nathan also faced a civil claim for breach of fiduciary duty. Charges are not convictions, Laura reminded me, and the process would be long. Still, seeing his name on the public docket made the floor seem less reliable. Local reporters called again. I issued one statement through the company. The allegations concern private conduct and will be resolved through the legal process. Whitmore Building Supply will cooperate fully, protect its employees, and make no judgment beyond the verified findings of its independent audit. I did not call Nathan evil. I did not describe the letter. I did not give interviews from my porch. Some people interpreted restraint as weakness. Others invented details larger than the truth. One online comment claimed Nathan had locked me in a basement. Another said I had fabricated the case to marry a young nurse. Human beings can be uncomfortable with a betrayal that is both ordinary and sufficient. They add chains or romance because monthly invoices and a copied signature seem too small to explain a family breaking. But most families do not break in one cinematic moment. They break through repeated choices. No one stops. Owen was 14, not 10 as many reporters guessed from old photographs, and old enough to find every article. A week after the charges, I received an email from his school account. "Grandpa, Dad says you could make this go away, but you care more about money. Mom says you hate her. Kids at school know. Is Dad going to jail? Are we going to lose our house? Why are you doing this?" I read it twice, then forwarded it to Laura and asked whether I could respond. She suggested a message that did not discuss evidence or blame his parents. I spent an hour writing 6 sentences. "Owen, I am sorry you are carrying questions that belong to adults. I do not hate your mother, and I am not asking for either parent to go to jail. Money was taken from a care trust and records were submitted in my name, so independent people must determine what happened. I cannot make the truth disappear, but I have made sure your school, tuition, and daily needs are protected no matter what happens to the house. None of this is your fault. I love you, and my door is open whenever contact is safe and comfortable for you." He did not reply. I kept my promise about his daily needs. Long before the dispute, Evelyn and I had established education trusts for both grandchildren, administered by Commonwealth. Their parents could not borrow from them, and I could not withdraw them in anger. Emma's final tuition and Owen's school costs remained secure. Melissa had once complained that independent trusts were insulting because they implied we did not trust the parents. At the time, I told her they were simple estate planning. Now I understood that Evelyn had seen more than she said. In December, I met Laura to rewrite my will. I did not remove Nathan's name in a burst of red ink. We reviewed each purpose. Personal belongings with emotional meaning would be offered to Nathan, Emma, and Owen through a written process. The grandchildren's trusts would continue. Nathan would receive no fiduciary role and no automatic control of the company. Any inheritance otherwise payable to him would first satisfy final judgments, restitution, or amounts he owed the trust and company. If money remained, it would be held in a protected lifetime trust rather than transferred outright. The largest change concerned my controlling units. They would pass to the employee ownership trust or, if that transaction failed, to a foundation supporting vocational training and aging-in-place services in our county. This is not a punishment document, Laura said as we reviewed the draft. It is a purpose document. That's what I want. If Nathan improves, I don't want an old, angry decision to prevent every form of help. But I will not make him a steward again simply because biology remains true. We also added a personal letter, separate from the legal instrument. Nathan, you once believed inheritance was proof of love. I helped create that belief by discussing your future control as though it were a family season that would arrive automatically. Ownership is not a birthday. It is responsibility proven in the light. I hope you build a life that does not depend on taking mine apart. If you do, the life you build will matter more than whatever money you expected from me. I sealed it and left it with Laura. Winter settled over Fairmont early. The river froze along the banks, delivery trucks needed chains, and our warehouse heaters failed during the coldest week of January. Years earlier, I would have worked 16 hours and slept in my office. This time I stayed until 6, then let Mark and the maintenance team handle the night shift. The building survived without my body in it. That lesson was useful because my right eye deteriorated faster than expected. The ophthalmologist scheduled cataract surgery for February. Rebecca organized the procedure. Leon drove me. Miriam attended the discharge briefing and stayed in my guest room that night. A home health nurse visited the next morning to check the eye shield and medications. Emma came Saturday with soup and a stack of audiobooks. No single person sacrificed a life. No one sent a false invoice. The plan worked because responsibilities were clear and paid services were actually provided. Nathan learned about the surgery from Emma and called me for the first time in 5 months. His attorney had advised him not to discuss the case, but he left a voicemail. I heard you had surgery. I would have come if you had told me. Whatever is happening, I'm still your son. You didn't have to make a point by hiring strangers. I listened once and saved it for Laura. Then I called him back with her permission. I did not hire strangers to make a point, I said. I made arrangements that don't involve you. Those were your exact instructions. I wrote that when I was angry. You delivered it before sunrise on company paper. That required more planning than anger usually gets. Melissa typed it. You signed it, he exhaled. Do you want me to beg? No. I want you to stop treating every consequence as something another person is doing to you. I called because I was worried. Then I appreciate the call. The surgery went well. I have follow-up care. Can I come by? I looked at the winter sun on the kitchen floor. Part of me wanted to say yes before the sentence ended. Another part remembered him standing before a judge, asking for control of my decisions. Not yet, I said. We can meet with a mediator when Laura agrees. A mediator? To visit my father? To begin rebuilding safety. Being my son is why a relationship may still be possible. It is not a key to my house. He ended the call. I sat with the sadness of that. But I did not change the answer. The employee ownership study concluded in March. An independent appraisal valued the operating business and core property at $6,800,000. The unused river parcel, separated from the warehouse, was valued between $2.4 and $3 million depending on zoning. We invited bids with conditions: public river access, funds for intersection improvements, no interference with company operations, and a binding local hiring plan. Harkness submitted the highest compliant offer at $3,100,000. Some board members wanted to exclude them because of their dealings with Nathan. If their conduct was illegal, the authorities will address it, I said. Our job is to choose the best transparent offer with enforceable protections. We don't reject value to prove we are angry. The final agreement funded new warehouse equipment, paid down company debt, and placed $1 million into the employee ownership transaction. It also added enough to my legitimate care reserve to cover conservative projections through age 100. The irony was not lost on me. Nathan had tried to use fabricated care to obtain the entire property. A fair, open sale of one unused portion funded actual care and gave the employees a path to ownership. At the signing, every material term appeared in the board packet. Conflicts were disclosed. Independent counsel reviewed the documents. Workers received a plain language summary before the vote. Transparency was slower than secrecy. It was also much harder to steal. The company began leadership interviews rather than promoting from bloodline. Mark applied, as did 3 external candidates and Leslie's daughter, who managed a supply operation in Ohio. We selected Carla Ruiz, a 48-year-old executive who had started her career driving delivery trucks. She understood both margins and the names of people moving the material. On her first day, she asked me what authority I planned to keep. Enough to answer history questions, I said. Not enough to make you wait for me before doing your job, she smiled. That may be the hardest transition you've made. She was right. For years I had believed the only alternatives were handing the company to Nathan or remaining until death. Building a third option required admitting that my dream for him had become a threat to everyone else. It also required recognizing my own role in making succession feel promised. I wrote Nathan a letter. Not about the case, but about that mistake. I told him I was sorry for speaking of the company as his inheritance before he was old enough to choose his own life. I was sorry for praising loyalty when sometimes I meant obedience, and for correcting his mistakes in private without requiring him to repair the damage publicly. I acknowledged the long hours he had worked and the real improvements he made. Then I wrote, "None of these truths authorize false invoices, false statements, or an undisclosed sale. An explanation can add context to responsibility. It cannot replace it." His response arrived through the mediator 2 weeks later. "You finally admit you trapped me there. If you had sold 10 years ago, none of this would have happened." I did not answer. Miriam asked whether that meant mediation was pointless. "It means he can hear an apology only as an opening argument," I said. "He isn't ready." "And are you?" "I am ready to listen. I am not ready to call blame accountability." The criminal case moved toward a negotiated resolution. The prosecutor offered reduced charges if Nathan and Melissa admitted the false records, paid restitution, surrendered the consulting company, and cooperated in tracing all funds. Because neither had a criminal history and much of the money could be recovered through insurance and assets, incarceration was not guaranteed. The court could impose home detention, probation, community service, and financial restrictions. Laura asked whether I wanted to submit a victim impact statement. Will it decide the sentence? It is one factor. You can describe harm and your views, but the judge decides. I spent days avoiding the blank page. When I finally wrote, I described the stolen money in 1 paragraph and the stolen credibility in 3. My son did not merely withdraw funds. He created a record of me as helpless so he could present himself as devoted. When I questioned that record, he asked a court to take away my decision-making authority. The harm was not that I might one day need care. The harm was using the possibility of weakness as a tool to obtain property. I did not ask for prison. I asked for complete restitution, prohibition from fiduciary roles during probation, verified financial disclosure, and community service chosen by the court rather than performed at my company. I wrote that leniency without admission would repeat our family's oldest mistake. At the plea hearing in May, Melissa admitted to identity fraud and falsifying records. Nathan admitted to conspiracy, exploitation, and breach of fiduciary duty. Their voices were barely audible, but the judge made each answer again until it was clear. Nathan acknowledged that he knew Harbor had not provided the billed services. He acknowledged directing Melissa to submit confirmations in my name. He acknowledged using those records in his continuity claim and failing to disclose the Harkness fee. Facts that had divided our family for 9 months became 6 minutes of yes, Your Honor. The settlement required $168,400 in trust restitution, $96,000 to the company for provable investigative and misuse costs, and surrender of claims to the proposed consulting fee. Insurance covered part, but Nathan and Melissa sold their house to fund the remainder. They moved into a rental across town. Nathan's minority company distributions were placed under court supervision and offset according to the shareholder agreement. Both received 5 years of supervised probation, 12 months of home detention on staggered schedules because of Owen, 400 hours of community service, and a prohibition on serving as trustee, guardian, conservator, or financial agent during probation. The convictions were felonies. If they violated the terms or concealed assets, prison remained possible. I watched Nathan absorb the sentence. He did not look at me until the judge asked whether he understood that restitution did not purchase forgiveness from the victim. "I understand," he said. Then his eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw no demand in them, only loss. It would have been easy to confuse that look with change. I had spent a lifetime doing that, seeing Nathan's pain and imagining the lesson had already followed. This time I waited. Change, when it came, did not arrive as an apology. It arrived as paperwork completed on time. Nathan submitted a full asset disclosure without hiding a retirement account. He signed the company recovery agreement. He turned over 2 old phones after investigators found that 1 cloud backup was incomplete. He began home detention without requesting a special exception for a family vacation. At the warehouse, we received restitution payments in the exact amounts ordered, even when they were small. None of those acts repaired our relationship. They did establish that he had stopped digging. Melissa complied too, though communication between them deteriorated. Their attorneys had blamed each other during negotiation, and probation required separate financial counseling. Emma told me they were attending marriage therapy. I did not ask whether they would stay together. That belonged to them. The court assigned Nathan 200 hours at a nonprofit that repaired homes for older adults and people with disabilities. He requested a different placement, arguing that the work created an appearance of public shaming. The probation officer denied the request. On his first week, Nathan installed grab bars in the bathroom of a retired bus driver named Mr. Calloway. He later told the mediator that the man apologized 5 times for needing help and tried to pay for materials with money folded inside an envelope. I told him the grant covered it, Nathan said during our first mediation session after sentencing. He looked relieved, but embarrassed. We sat in a neutral office with soft gray walls. The mediator, Helen Ross, had set rules. No discussion of active legal matters beyond settled facts, no threats involving grandchildren, no demands for forgiveness, and either of us could end the meeting. "Why are you telling me about Mr. Calloway?" I asked. Nathan rubbed his palms against his trousers. "Because I kept thinking about the railing you installed after all this started. I used it in court as proof something was wrong with you." "Yes, but Mr. Calloway wasn't incompetent. His knee was bad. The railing let him stay in his house." "Yes." He waited for me to say more. I did not. "I made planning look like decline," he continued, "because I needed the court to believe hiring help meant you couldn't decide." It was the first time he named a tactic without wrapping it in our history. "That harmed me," I said. "I know." "What exactly do you know?" He looked toward Helen, then back at me. "I know you might need help one day, and I made that dangerous for you to admit. If you said your eyes were bad or you wanted a driver, I turned it into evidence. So you had to prove you were strong before anyone would let you choose support." I felt my throat tighten. "That is part of it," I said. We did not embrace. Helen did not congratulate him. We moved to the next question. What contact, if any, was safe? For the first 3 months, we agreed to one mediated meeting every 4 weeks, and letters screened only for legal concerns, not emotional content. Nathan could not visit my house or company. He could attend Emma's graduation if he sat separately and made no attempt to force a family photograph. Information about my health would be shared only with my consent. "It feels like parole inside the family," he said. "You are on parole from conduct inside the family," I replied. Helen asked whether I wanted to rephrase that. "No," I said, "but I can say the purpose is safety, not humiliation." Nathan nodded once. At our second meeting, he brought a timeline he had written for his financial treatment program. It began 4 years before the letter, after my knee replacement. For 2 weeks, Nathan and Melissa had coordinated meals and transportation. The trust allowed reimbursement, but they failed to keep receipts and missed the filing deadline. Nathan believed Commonwealth's refusal to repay $1,200 was technical and unfair. "I told myself we had done more than $1,200 of work for you over the years," he said. So Melissa formed Harbor. The first invoice was for the amount we thought we were owed. It was $3,200. We included time. Without asking me, without asking you, the payment cleared. No one questioned it. The second month, they submitted another. Nathan said it became easy to categorize ordinary family contact as care. A phone call was wellness monitoring. Sending me a restaurant link became meal planning. Forwarding a pharmacy reminder became medication coordination. Soon they no longer required any contact at all. They copied the previous month's form, changed dates, and added an invented incident to make the service look individualized. "When did the option become part of it?" I asked. "About a year later. Miles sent the annual summary and I saw the support condition. I realized Harbor records could prove it." "Prove work you weren't doing?" "Yes." He said the Harkness proposal came much later. A representative approached him at a development conference and mentioned the river bridge. Nathan provided public information, then confidential records. He believed the sale would validate every compromise. Once he controlled the company, he planned to repay the care reserve from the closing and described the consulting fee as compensation for 20 years of underpaid leadership. "You were not underpaid," I said. "I know that now." "You knew your salary then," he flinched. "I knew the number. I compared it to the value I thought you were keeping from me. That is not the same as being underpaid." "No." Melissa began planning their life after the sale. A larger house near the city, a consulting practice, private school through Owen's graduation. They borrowed against expected money and increased Harbor withdrawals to cover the gap. Every month made confession more expensive. Why the letter? I asked. Nathan stared at the timeline. The Harkness lawyer needed the control certificate quickly. Melissa and I were reviewing it when you called about the appointment. I said I couldn't take you. You said, I don't ask for much, Nathan. That is what I said. It made me angry because the care file said you asked for everything. The person in the file needed us every day. The real you barely called. For a second I felt trapped by demands that I had invented. The admission was so precise I almost missed its weight. You resented me for the work you falsely claimed to do. Yes, he and Melissa argued after the call. She said I would keep asking more once I retired and that they needed to establish boundaries before the transfer. She drafted the note on her laptop. Nathan edited, "Don't plan on us," to "Don't expect me to take care of you." He printed it at the office, signed it, and drove to my house at 5:40 the next morning. I sat outside for 10 minutes, he said. Your kitchen light was on. I could have knocked. Why didn't you? Because if I saw you, I might not leave it. That is not the comfort you think it is. I know. I still left it. I asked whether he expected the note to end our relationship. No, he said. I expected you to be hurt for a few days and then call me when you needed something. You always came back. There it was. Not hatred, but confidence in my willingness to absorb it. I taught you that, I said. You didn't teach me to steal. No. But I taught you that consequences inside our family were temporary and private. I can own that without owning your choices. For the first time in mediation, Nathan cried. He turned his face away and pressed a fist beneath his nose the way he had as a boy. I wanted to cross the room. I wanted to put a hand on his back and tell him we would solve it. I stayed in my chair. Comfort is not the same as rescue. I was still learning the difference. Emma graduated in June on a bright, windy afternoon. The university held the ceremony on the football field, where thousands of families fought with folding programs and sun hats. I sat with Miriam and Rebecca. Nathan and Melissa sat 2 sections away with Owen, as agreed. When Emma's name was called, we all stood. For those few seconds, there were no legal sides. There was a young woman crossing a stage, her blue gown snapping in the wind, while everyone who loved her shouted at once. Afterward, Emma arranged separate photographs. She posed with her parents and brother near the library, then met us by the fountain. Nathan did not follow. He kept the boundary even though I saw how much it cost him. Before I left, Owen approached with Melissa several steps behind him. He had grown taller since Christmas. Can I talk to you? Of course. He looked at Miriam and Rebecca. Alone? We moved to a bench within sight of everyone. Dad told me what he did, Owen said. Not all the court words. The money and the forms. He said he lied about helping you. I'm glad he told you himself. Are we poor now? No. Your family has less than before and rents a home instead of owning one. That is a serious change, but it is not the same as being unsafe. Your education trust is still there. Mom said you set that up so they couldn't touch it. Your grandmother and I set it up so education money would remain education money. He picked at the paper edge of his sister's program. I was really mad at you. You had reason to feel angry. Your life changed after I reported what I found. Dad says I can be mad at him too. You can love someone and be angry with him. Is that what you do? Every day. Owen gave a small, unwilling smile. Can I come see your workshop sometime? Yes, if your parents and probation officer agree. We will arrange it through Helen. Everything has to be arranged now. For a while. Arrangements are how we make promises visible. He considered that, then hugged me quickly and returned to his mother. Melissa met my eyes but did not come closer. She had not participated in mediation with me. Her attorney sent one written apology after the plea, but it focused on stress, misunderstanding, and the influence of expectations. I replied only that I acknowledged receipt. Forgiveness was not a family discount offered to everyone at the same rate. Relationship required truth from the particular person who caused harm. The employee ownership transaction closed in August, almost 1 year after Nathan delivered his letter. 51% of Whitmore Building Supply moved into the employee trust. Each eligible worker received an annual statement explaining how value would accumulate. The plan was not a gift. Future company earnings would finance most of the purchase. Employees took on risk as well as benefit. We held a meeting in the loading bay. Carla explained voting rights, vesting, and what ownership did not mean. It did not guarantee bonuses. It did not make every decision democratic. It did give workers a share in value. They helped create and board representation through elected trustees. Reggie Holt, the forklift operator who had asked whether Nathan was coming back, was chosen as one of the first employee trustees. I never thought I'd own part of the place where I wear steel-toed boots, he told me. Neither did I said. That was a failure of imagination on my part. The company plaque in the lobby still carried the Whitmore name. I considered changing it, but the employees voted to keep it. A name can outgrow the person who misused it. I stepped down as board chair at the end of that meeting, a year earlier than planned. Denise became chair. I retained one seat and office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Carla received full operating authority. That evening I returned home before 5. The house was quiet, but the quiet no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like space I had chosen. My care plan had become part of ordinary life. Rebecca checked in monthly. Leon or another driver handled medical appointments. I joined a walking group at the community center, where no one knew the details of the company until a retired teacher recognized my name. Miriam held my medical power of attorney. Commonwealth managed the reserve with quarterly reports sent directly to me and Laura. I paid for real services at fair rates. Friends and family offered what they wished. No one earned ownership by counting hours beside me. One morning after our walking group, a retired librarian named Judith asked how I had chosen Rebecca. Her 2 daughters lived in different states, and she had delayed hip surgery because neither could stay for a month. She spoke about that fact as if distance were a moral failure she needed to hide. I gave her Rebecca's card and told her what the first cataract procedure had taught me. A driver could drive. A nurse could check medicine. A neighbor could bring soup because she wanted to. Her daughters could call, visit when possible, and remain daughters instead of becoming an exhausted medical system held together by guilt. "Doesn't that feel lonely?" Judith asked. "Sometimes," I said, "but dependence on one frightened person can be lonely too. A plan gives more people smaller promises they can actually keep." She scheduled the surgery. Our walking group organized meals. Her insurance covered short-term home therapy, and one daughter came for a long weekend. 6 weeks later, Judith returned with a cane and a photograph of herself walking to the mailbox. The experience reminded me that Nathan's original desire for boundaries had not been wrong. Adult children have jobs, partners, children, bodies, and limits. The wrong lay in turning a reasonable boundary into contempt while secretly collecting money and property for care never given. If he had told me honestly that he could not drive on Friday, I would have hired Leon and gone on loving him. If he had asked to discuss professional support, I would have listened. What destroyed trust was not his refusal to become my entire care plan. It was his willingness to pose as that plan when doing so became profitable. The next challenge came in October, when I woke with my heart racing and a pressure beneath my ribs. My smartwatch recorded an irregular rhythm. I followed the plan, pressed the emergency call button, unlocked the front door remotely, and sat near the entrance. Paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. The diagnosis was atrial fibrillation, frightening but treatable. I spent 2 nights in the hospital while doctors adjusted medication. Miriam came the first day. Rebecca coordinated discharge. Emma drove from her clinical placement on Saturday. I did not call Nathan. This time, however, not calling him felt less like following his letter and more like avoiding a question. We had completed 4 mediation sessions. He had complied with every boundary. He had not requested money, company access, or a reduction in restitution. His community service supervisor described him as reliable. None of that erased the past. But waiting for perfect proof of change could become another way of refusing the future. I asked Helen to tell him I was in the hospital and stable. He sent one message through her. "I am glad you are stable. I will not come unless you invite me. If there is a practical task your plan does not cover, I can do it without reimbursement or credit. Otherwise, I will wait." The wording mattered. No demand to be needed. No accusation that strangers had replaced him. No claim that being my son entitled him to the room. I invited him for 20 minutes the next afternoon. He arrived alone, carrying nothing. No flowers, no legal folder, no performance. He stood just inside the hospital room until I pointed to a chair. "You look better than I expected," he said. "Your expectations have caused enough trouble." He laughed once, then stopped, unsure whether he was allowed. "That was a joke," I said. "I'm out of practice." We talked about the medication and Owen's soccer team. Nathan told me Mr. Calloway's bathroom project had passed inspection. He did not mention the company until I asked whether he had heard about employee ownership. "Emma showed me the article," he said. "It was a good plan." "Do you mean that?" "I don't like that it happened because I lost my place, but the plan is good. Both can be true." That answer sounded more honest than generosity would have. Before he left, he said, "I'm sorry you were here 2 nights before, I knew. I understand why. I wasn't trying to punish you. I know. I made myself unsafe to call. He waited, perhaps hoping I would disagree. I did not. He nodded and left when the 20 minutes ended. Trust did not return in that room. Something smaller did. Accuracy. Over the next 6 months, our contact expanded cautiously. Nathan visited at Miriam's house twice. He and Owen came to my workshop under an approved schedule, and we spent an afternoon repairing the wooden tool chest Nathan had built in 7th grade. Its joints were crooked, and one drawer stuck in damp weather. Years earlier, I would have remade the drawer while he watched. This time I held the board while he planed it. "I used to hate this chest," he said. "You pointed out every gap. I thought teaching meant finding what was wrong. Sometimes it does. Not before saying what holds." He ran his hand over the scratched top. It held. We left one imperfect joint untouched. Melissa and Nathan separated the following spring. Emma told me only after they had informed Owen. Their marriage had carried problems before Harbor, and the case gave every grievance legal language. I did not celebrate. Divorce was not restitution, and staying together would not have been proof of growth. Melissa eventually requested a mediated meeting. She arrived with a written account that named her choices directly. She admitted creating the false email, inventing care events, using money for personal expenses, helping draft the rejection letter, and threatening me with Owen's feelings. She did not blame Nathan until after listing her own actions. "I believed your money was already ours," she said. "Not legally, emotionally. I thought we were waiting for you to release it. Every time you spent something on yourself or delayed succession, I felt you were taking from our future. My life was not a delay before your future. I know that now. Knowing is not the same as rebuilding. I understand. I'm not asking to come to your house. I wanted to say it without a plea deal attached." I accepted the apology as an act, not a conclusion. We agreed that future contact would center on the grandchildren and remain limited. I did not need to punish her forever. I also did not need to manufacture closeness to prove I was kind. 2 years after the original letter, my left cataract was ready for surgery. Rebecca booked the procedure and arranged Leon's van. At our monthly lunch, Nathan asked about the date. "Would you like me to drive you?" he said. "It's all right if the answer is no. I won't change the plan unless you ask." The question brought the Tuesday morning back with surprising force. Rain on the windows, embossed stationery, 8 short sentences reduced to 3 cruel ones in memory. I looked at my son across the diner table. He was 47 now. Probation had taken the polish from him, or perhaps simply the certainty. He worked as a purchasing manager for a regional nonprofit housing group. His salary was less than half of what Whitmore had paid. He lived in a modest apartment and spent Saturdays completing service hours even after the court reduced the remaining requirement for good compliance. He had made restitution payments for 23 straight months. He had not once asked what he would inherit. "Leon is already booked," I said. Nathan's face fell before he could hide it. "But you can come with us," I continued. "You can sit in the waiting room and hear the discharge instructions. Miriam did it last time." He nodded. "I'd like that." "There is one condition." He became still. "No invoice." For half a second, shock held his face. Then he laughed. I did too. It was the first joke about Harbor that did not feel like stepping on broken glass. On the morning of surgery, Nathan arrived 10 minutes early. He did not bring a form or take a photograph to prove he was present. He rode beside me in Leon's van and talked about the weather. At the clinic, he held my coat while the nurse placed drops in my eye. When I signed the consent, he looked away from the page. The procedure took 19 minutes. Afterward, the world appeared too bright through the clear shield. Nathan listened as the nurse explained the medication schedule. He wrote it down, then handed the page to me rather than keeping it. At home, Leon walked me to the door. Nathan waited on the path. "Do you want me to come in?" he asked. I considered the question. My meals were prepared. Miriam would arrive at 6. Rebecca had called. I did not need him. That was precisely why I could answer freely. "For a cup of coffee?" I said. 1 hour. Inside, he sat at the kitchen table where I had opened his letter 2 years earlier. The brass mail slot shone in the afternoon light. I made coffee one-eyed while he read the instructions aloud. Not because I could not understand them, but because sharing an ordinary task no longer needed to prove anything. At the end of the hour, he washed both cups. "I can stay longer," he said. "I know. Do you want me to?" "Not today." He accepted the answer, put on his coat, and left through the front door. There was no dramatic reconciliation after that. Trust rebuilt itself through uneventful things. Nathan called when he said he would. He arrived when invited and left when asked. If he made a promise, he wrote it down for himself, not as evidence against me. When he disagreed, he did not call my doctor or question my mind. We never returned to the relationship we had before. I no longer gave him keys, fiduciary authority, or access to accounts. He no longer spoke of the company as his lost birthright. Some damage should not be erased. It should become a boundary with a history. But we developed another relationship, smaller and more truthful. Emma became an occupational therapist and worked with older adults returning home after injury. She said our experience taught her to ask patients what independence meant to them, rather than assuming it meant doing everything alone. Owen attended a public high school after the family could no longer justify private tuition beyond what his trust covered. He discovered he liked welding and began spending Saturdays in Whitmore's apprenticeship program under Carla's rules, not mine. "Does that mean I might own part of it someday?" he asked Reggie. "If you work here long enough like everyone else," Reggie said. That was the only inheritance promise Owen received from the company. At 76, I moved from the old two-story house into an accessible cottage at the retirement community where I had placed the deposit. I made the decision after slipping on ice. Not falling, just catching the railing and recognizing that maintaining 4 bedrooms for memory's sake had become another kind of fear. I sold the house through an ordinary listing. Nathan helped me sort the attic, but I hired movers and paid them. He asked for the baseball trophy and the graduation photograph. I gave him both. I kept a copy of the photograph for my cottage desk. On moving day, he found the original letter inside my important papers binder. He held the plastic sleeve by its edges. "You kept it. It is part of my records. Do you read it?" "Not anymore. I wish I could take it back." Taking it back would remove the warning. We needed the warning. He looked at the Whitmore letterhead. "It destroyed everything I thought I was getting." "No. It exposed what you were doing to get it." He nodded slowly. "That's different." "Very." I returned the letter to the binder. My new cottage had no stairs, wide doors, and a small porch facing maple trees. I chose my own furniture. The care reserve paid legitimate monthly fees, reviewed by an independent trustee. Some days I ate in the community dining room. Some days I drove to Whitmore and annoyed Carla with historical suggestions. On Thursdays, Miriam and I still had dinner. Nathan visited twice a month, usually with Owen, sometimes alone. I never expected him to take care of me in old age. Expectation had been the wrong frame from the beginning. A child does not owe a parent the surrender of his life because the parent once changed diapers or paid tuition. Professional care is real care. Friends, communities, and thoughtful planning matter. I could accept those truths without accepting contempt, deception, or the idea that my future weakness made my present property available. Nathan was allowed to have his own life and family. He was not allowed to finance that life by inventing service to mine. One autumn afternoon, 3 years after the letter, we sat on my porch watching leaves collect along the path. My right hand had begun to tremble slightly. The neurologist called it essential tremor. Inconvenient but not dangerous. Nathan noticed me steadying my cup with both hands. "Would a mug with 2 handles help?" he asked. He did not reach for it. He did not announce a solution. He asked. "It might," I said. The next visit, he brought 2 mugs from an adaptive kitchen store. He left the receipt inside the bag so I could see he had paid $12.80. Not because I required proof, but because transparency had become one of the ways he showed respect. "You don't need reimbursement," I said. "I know. It's a gift. You can hate the color." The mugs were bright orange and truly ugly. "I do hate the color." "Good. Your judgment is intact." We laughed, and I used one anyway. That evening, after he left, I stood by the window and watched his car turn beyond the maple trees. I thought about the morning he had come before dawn, too certain that I would endure anything rather than risk losing him. He had been wrong. I had lost the version of him I protected. I had lost the company future Evelyn and I once imagined. I had lost money, privacy, and the easy trust that makes family feel like home. But I had not lost my mind, my choices, or my right to define care for myself. The sentence Nathan wrote to free himself from responsibility became the sentence that freed me from a dangerous illusion. It showed the trustees that his invoices were false. It showed the board that his succession claim was built on a contradiction. It showed the court that boundaries were being used as one story and dependence as another. Most important, it showed me that love without limits had become permission. I changed that. Not by erasing my son. Not by handing everything to a stranger out of spite. not by pretending I would never need anyone. I changed it by planning honestly, protecting the people who depended on the company, paying for the care I received, preserving the grandchildren's future without purchasing their loyalty, and allowing consequences to last long enough to teach what rescue never had. Nathan did not inherit control of Whitmore Building Supply. He did not receive the $9 million shortcut he had planned. What he eventually received was less comfortable and more valuable, the chance to know his father without owning him. What I received was the same chance with my son. The next morning, I drank coffee from the ugly orange mug. My hand trembled, but the second handle held steady. Outside, an employee-owned Whitmore truck passed on the road toward town. The blue lettering was visible between the trees for only a moment, carrying our family name into a future none of us had expected and more people had earned. I raised the cup, watched it disappear, and did not feel abandoned.